Good morning. Hi, everyone. I am Tara. I am the lead Nexus provider for Telemedica, and thank you for joining me today. We're going to be talking about a couple of topics this month, more about services and uh, support documents for VA disability claims. And so we're kicking it off with some exciting news today. So, as of today, Telemedica has started offering DBQ services again. I'm really excited about this because I really do believe this support document can make a difference in several VA disability claims, which is why we're going to be talking about DBQs and the benefit of private DBQs for veterans in today's live. I want to give a little disclaimer at first. You have to excuse my voice and possibly me coughing throughout this. My allergies, for some reason, are way off the charts. So I'm hoping to keep them in check, but just wanted to give you that heads up that you might hear me coughing throughout as I talk. So, talking about DBQ services and how they benefit your VA disability claims, we'll start with what is a DBQ. I know some of you already know what that form is, are very well versed in exactly what we're talking about here, but there are definitely a lot of other people who may be confused about it. So I want to make sure we're all starting off on the same page, understanding some basic definitions of what this is. So a DBQ is short for Disability Benefits Questionnaire. What that is, it's an official VA form and it focuses on the physical exam or the pertinent medical information that's needed to rate a condition. An important fact to remember is that it does not contain a medical opinion for the connection of a condition. That's what a Nexus letter is for, and we'll be talking about the Nexus letters next week. But if you think about this in a simplified version to where the VA claims process is divided into two parts. First, the connection, and second, the rating. The DBQ's main objective is to communicate important rating information. It allows you to maximize your award percentage, maximize your pay rate, and also qualify for other important benefits of having those higher award percentages. The DBQs are also an important part of the VA's fully developed claim process. If you're not familiar with this program, the fully developed claim, I just want to briefly touch on that. So when you submit your VA disability claim, you have an option to select a fully developed claim. What that means is that you're submitting all pertinent information so that if the VA chooses, can rate that condition in an expedited manner, that they don't have to seek out additional medical records, request additional items, that everything is supplied to them for that case, for that claim, and they can move forward in the steps of the process a lot faster. So submitting a private DBQ can be one tool used to satisfy a fully developed claim. So what does that all mean exactly? Well, it means that your claim can be rated without a C&P exam. Going to pause there for a second because that's a big one. A C&P exam is usually the most nerve-wracking part of this whole process for many veterans. And submitting private evidence, including a private DBQ, does not guarantee that you will not get a C&P exam, but it increases your chances of that, which can be huge to a lot of veterans, especially those who have a lot of anxiety and stress issues with going in front of doctors or going in front of examiners to plead your case that you feel is service connected. So how does that exactly happen? How does that work? So if the VA receives all necessary documentation to decide the claim, and it's very clear on the connection and the rating information, they can elect not to send you for that C&P exam and simply decide the claim based on what the evidence that's submitted. We saw an accelerated rate of this during the early stages of COVID. I think we had turnaround times somewhere in days to a week once things were submitted for a fully developed claim. So the process is there. And I think now that COVID has sort of made that process a little bit more comfortable for many raters and VA personnel to accept that it's possible to rate a condition and rate a claim without having to go to a C&P exam. So I've been through my fair share of the C&P exams. Let me tell you, it does not get easier the more that you do. I think each and every one of them, no matter how simple the condition is, how strong the claim is, how how confident you are, going into those exams is just very nerve wracking. And I know a lot of veterans who actually delay submitting their claims just for not wanting to deal with it, not wanting to have to go into a CMP exam and put themselves on display and become vulnerable to explain their embarrassing symptoms to a stranger, someone who they don't feel actually cares about their condition. So, this is one reason why obtaining a private DBQ can be helpful. So, another reason, in our experience, the benefits of using a private DBQ with your VA disability claim is that you'll likely get a faster rating decision and a more accurate VA rating decision. So, it allows you to have more control in the situation. You can follow the evidence. You're submitting your evidence for us to review. You can follow the evidence, check the documents to make sure that all pertinent information is included for your claim, as opposed to a CMP exam where the examiner is hired by the VA. They are also provided information at the VA's discretion. They're instructed to provide a specific opinion for your claim by the VA, and you have zero control, zero input other than submitting the documents for your claims process. You really are left in the dark as to what's being provided to them. They may not even send your entire evidence file to the CMP examiner. It's an unfortunate situation that occurs all too often, and it is a disadvantage to that veteran if the CMP examiner is not provided all the pertinent information to make a decision or opinion for your claim. I'm speaking from personal experience. I've had the unfortunate experience of having a CAP exam where the provider admitted to me that the only form he got was a blank DBQ from the VA and was asked to provide a medical opinion. How can a provider who does not know me or have any access to my medical evidence fill out this important form accurately? It is a broken system. And I think everyone is aware it's a broken system, but they're just not acting fast enough to fix a lot of these problems. I don't think that CMP examiners are against you or always in a negative opinion, no matter what. I just think that they sometimes are given information with one arm tied behind their back, and it's hard to make an accurate decision as a medical provider without adequate information or adequate education on VA regulation and rules. And I think that's where we see most of the errors that come through our services, where we're dealing with denials or dealing with clients who've been denied before they come to us for private evidence. So, going through additional questions that I get frequently about DBQs is, how is a private DBQ different from submitting my medical records containing the same information? I get that one a lot. The difference, in my opinion, is the presentation and language. The DBQ is a faster and easier way to communicate the necessary rating information to the rater. Yeah, the information may be there in the medical records, but the rater would need to read every page and search for that information. It sets up the possibility of something being missed, overlooked, or discounted as less important, resulting in either a denial or a lower VA disability rating at times. The language, like I said, is also important. Most medical providers don't document in the same language or phrases that the VA uses for rating purposes. So, interpretation of the medical records by a specialized companies such as Telemedica and medical providers who are trained, such as our Nexus team, can help show the VA rater the severity of the disability and explain what the treating provider is documenting in relation to your condition. I'll use an example of IBS for this. The rating criteria relies on a scale of mild, moderate, and severe, with rating percentages ranging from 0 to 30%. Most treating providers don't use this wording in their treatment notes. They don't say veteran Smith has severe IBS in a way that the VA can see that as a clear signal that you meet that criteria for the 30% rating. Often, they're listing objective evidence and objective testing, treatments prescribed, and reports because they're responsible for treating you and taking care of the condition. And so the communication and the documentation piece, when you're a treating provider and concerned primarily about either healing you or improving your condition, is very different than a provider documenting the facts and the evidence to support a VA disability claim. I align it a little bit closer to the practice of law or how lawyers would view things. Their interpretation and taking it of the evidence, interpreting that in a way to highlight the key points is kind of exactly what we do with our documents. And what I think is important in communicating to the VA the exact level of your disability. So if you submitted those medical records where it only contained that information without interpretation, the C&P examiner or rater may be the ones deciding where your condition severity lies on that scale. And so depending on what information is provided to the C&P examiner, or depending on what is interpreted by the rater on a scale that's subjective, in my opinion, of mild, moderate, and severe, you're running the risk of being underrated. So this is where companies like ours come into play and are specialists in understanding the VA regulations, understanding medical documentation, and translating it appropriately so that the two line up, so that we're able to communicate the medical information in the VA language in a way so that we're comparing apples to apples as best we can to maximize your rating. Now, there's a lot of misconception out there about, will the VA consider a private DBQ? Will they honor private medical evidence? And the answer is yes. The law mandates that all medical information provided by a veteran will be considered equally, regardless of whether it's provided by a VA medical provider, contracted C&P examiner, or private healthcare provider. I could write you a note on a napkin, and that holds the same weight as your doctor or a C&P examiner providing this information. That's what that is pretty much saying, is that all evidence you submit, including lay evidence that you provide as far as information about your condition, must be considered equally. There is no such thing as, oh, the C&P examiner was an MD and Telemedica's provider is a PA. PAs, nurse practitioners, are all considered the same when it comes to providing competent and ability to provide a medical opinion. And all evidence, regardless if it's your private treating doctor who you've seen for 20 years or a private company who specializes in submitting medical evidence for VA disability claims such as Telemedica, it doesn't matter. Apples to apples, we are all the same. We are at the core of it. We are trained medical providers who have the knowledge and skills to provide a medical opinion and review and analyze this information. And that's what the law says. Now, the VA periodically updates publicly available DBQ forms, and our team of experts check prior to completion of your form that we're using the most up-to-date form. However, there are some situations of a delay from completion to form submission where a new updated version might come out. So what do you do then? I've had that situation happen, and some very nervous veterans if a form was submitted on an outdated form. Luckily, the law also protects the claimants, you veterans, who use previous versions of DBQ forms. And it prevents the VA from denying a veteran's claim because of an old form, as long as it falls under one of two conditions. The first condition is if the form was provided to the provider prior to the new form being available, or if the claim is filed within a year of the date of completion. So if that gives us a year from completing a DBQ, which co-aligns with possibly your timeline for submitting a claim if you've signed up and filed your intent to file. Briefly, if you don't know what an intent to file is, that's basically telling the VA, hey, I have a claim I'd like to submit, but I'm not ready to submit all the evidence yet. You have 1 year from that date of notifying the VA you have a claim to finalize the claim. And so this means that you can get this medical evidence at any time. Say you get medical evidence in February and you're not ready to submit it because you're waiting on additional specialized testing from your doctor or whatever the situation is, you're not submitting it till August. If they release a DBQ form between that time, the good thing is we don't have to redo a form and you're not at risk of having that DBQ be disqualified based on this law. So I wanted to put that information out there because it is very concerning to veterans if they hear that a form might be outdated. So we've got you covered on that, and the VA's got you covered on that, to where they include up to a year of completion, which should cover for your intent to file timeline. So no need to rush to submit that evidence if you're not ready to submit it. So what is the difference between having your treating provider versus a private company that specializes in VA disability documents such as Telemedica complete your paperwork. Well, some advantages of having your private doctor complete them is that you have a relationship with your doctor. They have a familiarity with your entire medical situation, with all of your conditions, and that affords them an advantage over any other provider, including the VA, including the CMP examiner, um, in providing accurate, fast, and complete information for your claim. However, most medical doctors don't routinely submit documentation for VA claims. They're not trained. This is not something that is included in medical training. This is a specialized area to where there's a lot of rules and regulations. And you're familiar with all the rules and regulations that came with military service. I mean, there's a regulation on your underwear. I mean, it's really, really detailed. The VA is the same. There's a regulation for everything, and there is a way to do things. There's a policy manual for everything. And if your private doctor is not familiar with those rules, those regulations, or if they're not familiar with the rating criteria, which does get updated periodically as well, then you may not have important information included on your documentation to submit to the VA. They may submit all of the pertinent treating medical information, but they may miss some important details that are important for the deciding and rating of VA disability claims. So that is where private companies such as Telemedica really shine, is that we have the expertise for that. We are able to read your medical documentation, interpret it, and spell out in the VA's language and the VA's terms, correlating to the rating criteria, exactly how severe your condition is. Remember, DBQs deal with the rating, not the connection. So we're able to communicate the severity in an appropriate manner to where the VA can understand exactly what's going on. There's no confusion, there's no question, there's no blurred lines on where the medical evidence is and how the VA takes that in relation to rating. There are also some situations where not all the DBQs are perfectly matched to the rating criteria. So you can go on the VA's website, print out a public-facing DBQ, hand it to your doctor, have them fill it out, but it may not contain the information that's required for the rating. Now, how does that make any sense? So I just told you earlier that the VA form is for rating purposes. So why would it not contain the essential questions for each condition to be rated? I don't really have an answer for that. I don't understand that part myself. It doesn't make any sense other than there are a lot of complications because there are a lot of medical conditions and they can be rated analogously to another condition. They could be named separately in the rating criteria. There are a whole host of reasons and why they group conditions together under the same DBQ, and it's almost impossible to ask every important question. Otherwise, those forms, albeit some of them are 10 or 12 pages long, it would be an unbelievable amount of information and not really easy for them to go through. So I'm not sure exactly why that is, but that is the case, that not all DBQs are a perfect match to the rating criteria. So if your private doctor is filling out this form, it's important for them to understand what is the rating criteria for your condition and make sure that they're including that pertinent information, even if it's in a comment section, because that's what we do. Sometimes we have to import information, put that important information in the remarks or comment section because it's part of the rating criteria and not a specific question that they ask us. And so that is another reason why having a private company who specializes in this can make the difference in your claim, especially if it is one that is not does not have a large amount of supporting evidence. So the other reason that when they may not be familiar with, I told you that sometimes these things get updated and that rating criteria gets updated. This is all published in the M21-1, which is referred to as the rating handbook. It's ultimately the Bible of VA disability rating. So it communicates changes that have been made and who is it pertinent to. And so all of this information is available. It's all public information. However, not a lot of people follow it. Not a lot of people track it. We do. We track it. And that's why we were able to really identify and hone in on some of those new connections when it came to presumptive service connection to the not Gulf War, but particulate matter, that when they released these new items, it didn't update the M21-1 for, I want to say, 1 to 3 weeks after the official announcement on the news was made. So it really can take some time to get that specific information out to the public once the announcement's made. But once it's put in the M21-1, it's also updated on the VA website. So there was a time period for when that information was put out, but not updated on the website. So there was a little bit of confusion as to, are there additional rules, regulations, or limitations when it comes to those new conditions, such as asthma, rhinitis, and sinusitis. They have a 10-year diagnosis stipulation, whereas the other particulate matter exposures do not. And so there are a lot of little teeny items in relation to these conditions, to where knowing the proper information, knowing the proper regulation, and the changes that come along with it can be helpful in your DBQ. Because if you are using a DBQ and your private doctor puts the date of diagnosis on there incorrectly because they didn't have the information from your previous provider, or whatever the situation, that could be an issue when it comes to connecting that. And that's something that companies like Telemedica would catch. We try to really prompt what is the earliest date of diagnosis, because we know that's an important factor. Whereas your doctor may not realize that your rhinitis diagnosis, if it's outside of that 10-year window, it put you into an uphill battle for fighting that claim. Whereas it would have been an immediate acceptance because you fit all that criteria. So these little details, they really do matter at times. So this is why I think you need to be very knowledgeable and careful about the items that you're submitting for your claim, and why a private medical evidence, such as a private DBQ, can be helpful to your claim, because C&P examiner can make that same mistake depending on the information the VA gives them. So it can be a very difficult road for some veterans who unfortunately fall into those situations. So another common question that I get asked doesn't the DBQ need to be filled out in person? That is not true. The DBQ does not need to be filled out in person. In fact, the VA doesn't even complete all of their DBQs in person. They can elect to ask for an ACE review, or one that's essentially based on chart review, in some situations that an in-person evaluation would not provide additional helpful information for your claim. Now, there's no legal requirement that a privately prepared DBQ to be done in person versus telehealth. In fact, telehealth is a very different field. It's a new and emerging field, to where there are definitely a lot of confusion about it. But telemedicine and telehealth are very different. Telehealth is being able to do that chart review and records review remotely. It does not require an actual telemedicine visit in order to fill out a private DBQ, according to those definitions. So from the VA's own website, telehealth DBQ exams are treated the same as in-person exams for VA rating purposes, as long as you're filling out the DBQ appropriately. So the important caveat to that is that some DBQs may not be appropriate for virtual completion, especially if the condition requires a physical exam, such as orthopedic conditions that require range of motion testing. This is why we don't offer any DBQ that's out there. We have a limited amount of DBQs for common medical conditions that we can complete virtually, and where we're not submitting a document that requires an in-person exam. Some neurological conditions require an in-person exam, some orthopedic, some eye conditions. There definitely, throughout all the body systems, there are some DBQs that we just cannot complete simply because it requires an in-person exam for rating purposes. If that exam is not pertinent to rating criteria based on the 38 CFR, which is the rating regulation for VA disability claims, then there are a select few that we have been filling out and will fill out virtually, because that is not part of the rating criteria. It is not applicable or pertinent to the situation. In addition, usually we have evidence that you've had a recent in-person exam by your doctor to document that there is nothing abnormal found to suggest that an in-person exam is required or needed. So we are watching out for those items. Our provider team at Telemedica is experienced at evaluating the situation and determining what services you may qualify for. So this is not something that you need to do on your own. It's not something, it can feel overwhelming. It's not something that you need to decide, do I need a DBQ for this condition or not? It's something that upon review of your evidence and medical records and the condition that you're seeking service connection for, our providers will communicate you what services would benefit your claim, what services are we offer. By no means do our providers tell you what documents you need. By no means do they coach you. Do they tell you that you need to purchase a support document? We simply communicate that either a Nexus letter or a Nexus letter and DBQ is available, and something that you need to decide for yourself what type of medical evidence that you would like to support for your claim. This is something that is a personal decision. There's no right or wrong answer to this. I personally believe private DBQs are beneficial for a lot of claims because it allows you to submit that same form apples to apples to a CMP examiner, especially if you get a CMP examiner who's not familiar with your case, not familiar with the VA system, or for some reason does not fill out the DBQ to a sufficient high standard of level, a high standard level to where your private doctor or a private company would fill it out. So it just extra evidence to provide for your claim. It's not required, and it is not something that is a guarantee, but it's one of those pieces of evidence that if I would say me personally, it's my opinion, if I were submitting 1,000 pages of medical records, I would not want to trust the rater to go through page by page and pull out all the specific details that are important to rating in those documents. 1,000 pages is quite a lot and to read. Even a couple hundred is quite a lot to read. And so if you can provide a very concise, detailed piece of information that communicates all the important items for your case, that's why I recommend having a DBQ submitted with your claim. They can always refer back to the medical records to confirm, to gather more information about that. But the key items are listed on that front page right there. Those few pages are key to success, in my opinion. And I think they've helped me in my claims personally because I don't know about you, but most of my medical documentation is very tiny fine print, and it's very long and lengthy. And to pull out key pieces of items, I just even for me to do it for myself, it definitely can get lost in translation when you're working with even 10 or 20 pages. I find reviewing documents that highlighting and writing notes and all of that when I review my documents for clients or even through my own medical records, it's something that can be lost from page to page. So to have something more concise is very helpful. So at this point, I'd like to open up to any questions we may have to try and see if we have anybody that may have a question that I didn't answer or get to. All right. I don't see anything coming through. That's okay. Like I said, I tried to be comprehensive about DBQ specifically. And so I hope you learned some important facts about DBQ forms that will help you in your claims journey. I'm excited to have announced that we're bringing that back to Telemedica's service line. And I want to extend an invitation to join me next week where we'll talk about Nexus letters, Nexus letters, facts, and how Telemedica's Nexus letters can help you maximize your chances at a successful service connection and achieve an increased rating percentage. So I do see a last minute question come through from Tina that she's new to this. What is a DBQ letter? And so, Tina, I would recommend replaying from the beginning, the very beginning. I talk about what a DBQ is. There is nothing that a DBQ letter. It is a form, a VA form. A Nexus letter is one that talks about connection. So a DBQ is that form communicating important rating information. All right, seems like that's it for today. So again, join us next week where we'll be talking about Nexus letters and how Telemedica's Nexus letters can help you maximize those chances at success. All right, Y'all have a great day. See you next week.